Hazel, we're glad to have you today, and we're looking forward to seeing some of your editing tips. We're going to be taking a look at a lot of different types of editing later, and at the end of your presentation, I'm going to give away another LUT pack for the Mood tool, and I'll show you guys how to use it. But Hazel, what sort of things do you want to show us today? And tell us a little bit about your photography and how Luminar fits into it.
I love doing a lot of different creative processes. I love to work with textures. That's kind of my thing, and getting some creative looks. So uh, we recently, well, about almost a year and a half ago now, moved to Tennessee. So that view behind me is our view from the deck, and there's tons of great old barns and buildings and cars, and that's the kind of stuff we love to shoot, my husband and I. And so I'm going to use a couple of scenes that are local that I did recently, and I'm going to show you how I do some of my processing. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And let me open up my Luminar. So I preloaded a few things to make it quicker for today's presentation. So I'm going to start with this scene over here of there's a railroad trestle next to it, but we get these nice reflections early in the morning over this farm over here in the background. And it's a nice enough scene, but I was very excited when the reflections came along because I wanted to change the sky in this and I didn't want to mess around with the reflection. So this is a perfect kind of image for that type of a process. So I'm going to go into this one. I am going to start with a template. So let's switch over there. And I went into this nature category, and from here I used the Sunny Small, and it just really made the colors pop.
Yeah, I like
Um,
how it brought out those fall colors there. It just
yeah,
feels
because
so warm
this
and
was
inviting.
last, I think this was like very late October, early November. And I did bring it back just a little bit to pull back a little bit of that brightness on there. And then we're going to go into our edit. And I really didn't do much other tweaking at this point. I did jump right into, let's get back to the right tab here, right into the sky replacement first. So I'm going to go into the skies and my selection. I am using my own skies today for these. I've loaded a whole bunch of my own in here. And the one that I want is, where to go?
And I just want
In
to point
here.
out that when she said she's loaded a bunch of her own skies in, she has indeed loaded a bunch of her own skies in, but now she
Yes,
could
I
browse them with thumbnails so she doesn't have to guess or
yes.
remember, I think I wanted Orange Sky 43.
Exactly. Although when I write it down in notes, it's like, okay, I know the name of this, so that finding it again, it's like, which one is it? So they need to have little. I'll put this in as a suggestion when you
Tooltips.
hover over it.
Sure.
If you can get the name popping up, that would also make it easier for those of us who do
A
a
left
lot
brain,
of
right brain
teaching.
sort of thing.
Yeah, just so that you can remember, where it is. So this one, I'm going to start here, and I did want to adjust it a little and bring the clouds up. So I'm going to go into the orientation, and my vertical offset I brought to like -40, so we could bring down some of what was hiding up at the top there. I wanted to see that line of clouds. There it goes. And then the relighting, I went down here and I upped that strength just a little bit more to really bring out those fall colors.
Yep. And what that relighting is doing is it's matching the lighting of the scene to the
Hmm.
lighting of her clouds. So think of the relight strength as being more about exposure, and then the
Hmm.
separate saturation would introduce a color cast to match the lighting of the sky.
Correct. Thank you. And then I'm going to go into that reflection, and I did up that a little bit to make that stand out a little bit more on the water because it's not a super strong
Yep.
sky with a ton of detail, but I really wanted to get that nice reflection because it is how it typically looks over there. And then I did go into the sky adjustments and changed my warmth a little bit to match the scene. And I did brighten it just a little bit there, just to make it a little bit more matching. And then we're going to go up to our essentials. And then I did go into my denoise, and I did a little bit. The sky was a little bit noisy to me, so I brought in a little bit of the denoise here. And then we're going to go all the way to the bottom to our professional. And I love this super contrast. This is just fabulous. And I know you've talked about it earlier today. I saw in some of the early sessions. And I really love the way that you can target the different areas. It's not a global contrast.
Yeah, it's nice, and we've got cool tools like that. Like you'll notice how
Yeah.
super contrast lets you target contrast based upon tonal range, and then structure targets it based upon need. And it's just
Yes.
like how in color harmony, split color warmth lets you warm and cool based
Yep.
on what's already warm and cool. So these are some of those
Exactly.
smart tools that make it easier.
And I'm going to up that warmth even just a little bit more. And yeah, we can see we'll do a split screen. You can see where we came from and how much it really made a much more dramatic image than what we had to start with. So let's undo that. So I'm going to go right into, and of course you would export this and save it to your system. But since I already have it saved, I'm going to jump right to the next one. So this is another local building. We got to meet the property owner, and unfortunately they're going to be tearing this one down this summer, so I'm very upset about that. But he asked me to take some shots. I had done canvases for him, and he asked for some shots with the daffodils this spring. So they only had a few, so I actually added some in Photoshop. I wanted to give him a few more than what were really there. So for this one, we're going to go back up to our Essential tab. I did not use a template on this one, but I'm going to add a couple of textures to this. So we're going to go into our Enhance AI. I'm going to start with a little bit of accent. I just wanted to bring out a whole lot of the detail here, and the structure is great for that. And really pop up the details in there. And you could do up here in Enhance, if you wanted to stick with this sky, if you use the sky enhancer, you could bring out a lot more color in there, but I wanted to give this a really dramatic, kind of a almost eerie look is what I was going for. So we're going to do something different with some textures. So we're going to come down to the creative section. We're going to change out that sky. Again, I'm using one of mine, and find it again. Yes, I do have quite a few in here. Let's see. Look for my dark blue one. And that one. It just takes a second to pop in there. There we go. And again, I did change the vertical offset a little bit just to bring up the clouds to where I wanted them. And then I'm going to go into the augmented sky. And sometimes I also do this with brushes that I have in Photoshop. I have some that I created, but this one also works really well. We're going to put some birds in the sky. So we're going to place the object, and then we're going to slide it up here, rotate it a little. And I made it a little bit smaller. And then we're going to move these birds. Come on. Little lag time there.
I'm having a Hitchcock moment here of creepy old house plus
That's
birds.
It's like going for.
Honko and the birds merged together.
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring those down just a little so it looks like they just took off from that tree. So we're going to leave that one. And then we're going to go up to that local masking. And we're going to add a texture. And I'm also using a couple of my own in here. So I'm going to go into load a texture. First, I'm going to use this dark blue one.
Yeah. And there was a question, Hazel, that I'm going to tackle while you're loading that in. Could you add the flowers with Luminar? You can now. So in the local masking tool, you see how Hazel's been loading in textures. You could also load in an object and then using the brush
Yes.
tool, erase away or paint it in where you want. So the flowers she added could now be done in Luminar, but that was not easy to do until the recent update, the update 2 we just shipped. So now you can do it that way. So I'm going to let her keep going, but that was just to
Yep.
answer John's question.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point, that you can do that now. So I've sized my texture to match the size of my image. And I really wanted to do that, especially with this texture, because it does have like a darker, almost a vignette, border. So I didn't want to lose that off of one end or the other. So we're going to come into our settings and we're going to change our blending mode to soft light. And then I brought the opacity down about there on that one. And I did want to take some of that blue tone off of the building. So I'm going to go ahead and do a mask. I'm going to do a painted mask and I'm going to use the eraser. And I started with my radius fairly large. And I'm going to leave the softness and opacity I had them set earlier, somewhere around 50%, 50, 55. And I'm just going to paint where I want to get rid of this texture. So I'm not lifting off of the mouse, I'm just painting all with one stroke here. And I just want to get rid of some of it, not quite all of it.
Yeah, and the reason why that's working so nicely is her brush is only set to about halfway. So it's minimizing the texture, but not erasing the texture. So she's de-emphasizing the texture.
And then to get rid of it off of the chimney, we can make the brush a little smaller and just kind of do a little bit of painting in there. And you could really fine tune the mask, of course, as detailed and closely as you wanted. I'm doing it a little quickly right now. And then we're going to add another texture. So I'm going to use my add and load this one. I'm going to use this dark gray. And then we're going to go into our settings. I'm going to change this one. I actually did this one a little different than normal. I went with multiply, and it's going to start out really dark, but we're not done yet. So I'm going to do some adjustments with the brightness and contrast, which is different than how I normally do textures, but it really worked well with this one in here. And again, I'm going to also place that I need to resize that a little bit so we can see the top edge. Come on. It's a big texture. It's a square texture, so, and we're on a rectangle image, so it's a little bit of playing around with it. But again, I wanted to keep that border that it had. And then the last thing I was going to do is to show you if you wanted to add your watermark, you could just go back into the add again, and I have it loaded. It's a PNG file, so it has a transparent background.
And if you guys don't know how to make one of these, there's several different ways. I'm guessing that you probably made yours in something like Photoshop where you're comfortable, but there's online image editors. And I'll put one into the chat pod, for example. There's one called Online PNG Tools. And there's a free thing where you just load that, Vanelli mentioned earlier, hey, you could, write your signature on a piece of paper and then just take a picture of it. Well, this will give you that flexibility to turn it into a transparent PNG. So I put a link in there. You can make these with PowerPoint, with Apple Keynote, with lots of tools. We're just not a layered image editor, but I love that there. So now this way, your PNG also has a drop shadow on it. Yes. So that works great for what we call type on pattern. Because if you just had a light watermark with no drop shadow, it'd be hard to read in the brighter areas. But by having that contrasting edge, you've got the perfect watermark because it works on both light and dark.
And that's why I have a black stroke outline around the white letters to also help if you're on a lighter colored image, then the stroke helps it stand out as well as the drop shadow. So yeah, I've been creating some for a long time. It took me a while to perfect it and kind of get that one that works for every image without having to have a black copy and a white copy. And you can do them as brushes too, but then I find you're limited to just that. It's either all white or all black. So I like having the variety in that. So that would be my image on that one. So we definitely went with the dark, spooky look with the birds and, you know, kind of the almost nighttime type of a look. So that was a
I really like
simple
the use of
choice.
that texture. And,
Thank
you
you.
know, I think what I like here, Meredith, is you've tied things together well, meaning you have a color feeling to this image. You know, you
Hmm.
leaned into that blue. We've got
Yeah.
that cool shade of blue on the house. And I
Hmm.
like this better because it's not like you try to make it look like night. You make
Right.
it like we're leaning into night, and I
Hmm.
feel the change. You create anticipation. And that use of texture in the sky and that you layered on top ties beautifully with the subject matter, and it just feels like a more
Yeah.
unified image.
Yeah. I thought I played around with a couple different textures to find ones that I really liked with it. And I like doing the little bit of grunge border. It's a little different than doing a vignette. And I know a vignette you try and do much more subtle, where the borders I kind of do a little more punchy, and have it stand out as part of the image. So that's, you know, my style anyway.
Yep.
And I'm gonna do just another real quick one.
Yep. Go ahead and load up your next picture. I'm going to answer
Sure,
two questions really quick. So Vince was
absolutely.
asking about the steps in the erase tool. You're not using the erase tool here, but I'll answer that one really quick.
Hmm.
So Vince, on a Mac, we currently track the steps independently. We don't on a Windows machine, but that's expected in a future update. And when I say expected, I mean it's already working, it's just being tested. So they'll be adding that functionality so you can use the undo command for brushstrokes. But the other way around that is don't go so aggressive. Just do smaller erases and apply each one, and then they're snapshotted in your history tool, and you can go back one at a time. So it's going to get better, Vince, but it does automatically work. Go ahead, Hazel. I just wanted to
Perfect.
solve his
No
question.
problem. That's great. For this one, I had tried some of my own skies, and then I found one of Luminar's that fit this image perfectly, and you'll see why in a second. So actually, before I do that, I'm going to go back up to the templates. This was one that I had originally thought I did a pretty good job of editing the bird. It was, you know, slightly dark, and this I took last summer right off of our back deck. And so we're going to come in here and we're going to go back over to templates, and it suggested animal friends. So I clicked in here and I was playing around and I clicked on this natural one, and I was utterly amazed at how good this bird looked with this preset. It just, it brightened up those shadows so much more than I had done in Photoshop, and just really emphasized the beautiful rim lighting this had. There were clouds in the sky that day, but I got the better shots when it was in front of the blue area. It really made the lighting stand out. And then I just did pull back just a teeny bit on this preset or template. I'm used to using that word preset over the years, so I got to get used to templates. So then we're going to go.
Let me answer that one so everyone understands what the
Sure.
difference is. So presets only store the settings for sliders.
Hmm.
Luminar templates can store a DCP profile, which is used sometimes with certain raw files to convert them to the way the manufacturer wants. It can store a LUT for the mood tool for the lookup tile. And it can also contain things like those PNG files, like the textures and watermarks that Hazel used. And so by using the local adjustment tool, you could save a template that has 5 or 6 overlaid elements, and it's all stored within that template. And then when you give it to someone else or you move it to another computer, all of those things move with the template. So the color, the recipe, the texture, everything. So that's why we call them templates, because they have things within them, not just settings like presets.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to give them the official answer there.
Oh yeah, no, that's, you can describe that much better than me.
That's my job.
I know, and you're good at it. I was watching your first session this morning and I actually took some notes. I'm like, oh, I got to remember that. And some of the workflow things, I was like, yeah, that really works well. Um, so again, in this one, I did use the blue skies from Luminar. And when I clicked on this one, it just so fits this bird perfectly. Give it a second to finish thinking. I loved the way this cloud went right around the head of the bird, and it's got these nice wispy clouds coming off the wings. It was just like it was made for this image. I thought it was just absolutely perfect. So the only couple things I did here was, because it doesn't have a true horizon, I just brought the horizon blending down to get rid of that little blue bar at the bottom. And this one was a little bit warm here, so I went into the sky adjustments. Let's see, we don't need orientation. We want to go down here to the warmth, and I brought down the warmth some to make it a little bit bluer, and I brought the brightness down just a hair. I had this one printed on a canvas, and it came out really pretty. And there we go. With just a few tweaks, I took something that I thought was a decent image and turned it into something way better. And you can see that in the split screen too. And it's like, oh, it just has so much more pop and life and vividness, and everything just was
I love that.
So much better.
And before we leave this image, go to your color tool for a moment. And, you know, this is where there's supposed to be a color cast because of the environment. But if you want to refine that under the color tool, one of my favorites is that remove color cast. And sometimes at low values, it could be helpful, and just, you know, in case there was any other color reflected from something. So it's just a nice way to go in, you know, just a subtle amount sometimes helps.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm still learning my way around some of these tools. Some I use more often than others, but I'm definitely diving in more and more. And I find myself coming back to Luminar.
So
on a lot of images now.
Hazel, we're about to bring up our next guest, but where can people go to find more of your content? And I know you have a blog and you have other resources. You lead workshops, I think, as well.
Yes, we do. We're actually doing some down here in Tennessee. We call them Barns and Backroads, and we're doing a virtual creative conference at the end of June. Everything is on my website, which is meredithimages.com, and you can link to the blog from there and everything else.
That's excellent. Meredith, or Hazel, I should say, I'm sorry. Long day of lots of talking. You said Meredith Images, so I had that in brain.
Yeah, that's why everybody calls me Meredith. No problem.
No problem. Hazel, this is great. And I love just how you're willing to share your process here. And, you know, folks, this is great. Like when you're shooting something like a bird, it's not like you could say to the bird, could you just fly over there so the more interesting clouds are behind you? Sometimes you got to live in the moment. And so I know that I see landscape photographers get very, you know, some will get somewhat aggressive and say, oh, you know, we shouldn't have, you know, we shouldn't be putting skies back there. But there's going to be times when you want to do that. And if it works for you, it works. So.
I do it a lot. You know, it's like, why not? We have these tools, and they're all tools. It's part of the process, and it's all art. So it's whatever your vision is.
Absolutely. Well, I put into the chat pod a link for creating your own signatures, so that free PNG online tool, which you guys are welcome to download. And I'm going to show you one more thing with lookup tables here. I'm going to give you a cool pack in the chat pod. So for those of you watching us on Zoom, Hazel, thank you again for coming in today and sharing these things. And we'll catch up more again soon.
Alrighty, I'm going to stop sharing so you can do what you need to do.
Thank you. And then we'll have our next guest. Angela is going to be up here in just a moment. So let me share these. What I just did is I put some LUTs in there. These are analog LUTs, and I'm going to show you how these work. So Angela, you are up next, but let me just walk through the analog LUTs here. So what I just gave you is a really cool pack of vintage LUTs, and these create vintage colors. So first up, when you want to use LUTs, that stands for lookup table, they're used with the mood tool. So, you know, you could take advantage of tools like enhance and structure to really nail the contrast and the dynamic range of the image. Then you can go to mood tool. And mood tool is a simple way to color grade. Color grading is the artistic manipulation of color. Now, some other tools like Lightroom give you 3 roller balls that you could play with, and that's fine, but it's not very sophisticated. LUTs are what the film industry uses and Hollywood uses as a way to translate complex color recipes. So you just click here where it says choose LUT, and you see lots of built-in ones, which are cool. And I had a play in making a lot of these, but you could see things like Tokyo, Seattle, etc., Monterey. And these are themed with colors. I'm going to crank this up a little bit. But I just gave you a pack of 100 vintage LUTs, or retro LUTs, I should say. So you're welcome to download those. And these are a lot of fun. So let's go in here to the lookup tables, and I just put them as a download. And so they're the analog LUTs. Again, these previews that you're seeing is because I have a third-party utility loaded that lets me visually browse them. But you could click on one of these, and there's all sorts of options. So I'll apply that analog look, and I instantly get that cool sort of feeling of film stock. You see this style of color grading all the time. I can load another one and go back and browse and find something that else has the feeling that I want. I want this one that feels a little bit cooler and darker. So there we go. And then once it's applied, you can still refine the contrast of it and the intensity of the color that it's changing. And then what's cool is you are still free to use the rest of your tools. So using color, I can go in and say, you know what? I want to bump up the saturation of the reds. And with my luminance slider, make those reds a little darker to tone down those lanterns. And you know what? I want to go after the yellows here and brighten those up so they really pop, make them a little lighter. And looking up here at the sky, you know, I want to pull that out to really lose some of the blue in the scene so we lean into these golds and oranges. And you see how we were able to give that feeling for street photography before and after very quickly, which works really nicely to pull this all together. To finesse that, we've already talked about it, but remember, mystical is great when you want rich dark shadows, and Orton effect under glow is great when you want bright shadows. So that makes the blooming highlights, and you can do a little bit of each. I could say, you know what, blow out those highlights a little bit, but make my blacks richer. And with the colorize option here, you can warm or cool that. And then, because we're going into a street photography look, just a hint of grain. Remember, zoom to 100% when adjusting the grain, so you could see that. And now you get a much faster real-time preview with Update 2. So you could really judge what's happening there. And that's going to work. So there we go. I'll put the link in the chat pod in just one moment. But we can have these awesome looks and really dial that in. And then remember, what's cool about that is if you like it, save it as a template. And now under your template section, it's going to appear right there at the top, My Template. And I'm just going to call this Tokyo. Oops, let me go back 1 second. I clicked the wrong way. Rename, not edit, there we go. Rename Tokyo Retro. And now I can go to other images in my catalog and apply it. Let's just select a whole range here and I'll sync those. Or I could have clicked on the template and you'll see that it's going to apply that. So let's just come up here actually. We'll take this one and I'll show that template in action. There's my template, Tokyo Retro. With one click, it's going to load in all of those adjustments, giving it that warm, vintage retro feel. Then it's super simple. Just select a range of images, shift-click works, adjustments, sync. And it will take that adjustment and apply it to all the other images, giving it that consistent color grade. Look at how I brought up that feeling of the warm reds and the browns and that nice feeling in that off-white area so you feel that warmth coming through. So you can do some cool things this way, and syncing and templates is really the way to do it. And that's one of the underpinnings of Luminar AI, the ability to use these AI adjustments so that it will adjust intelligently to each image. Remember, you'll see those AI adjustments. They have the letter AI next to them in gold. Those are some really strong ones for you to use. Works well. Oh, and remember, atmosphere can be fun too. This ability to layer in a little bit of atmosphere, and you'll see different types. And then you could adjust the depth, but you could add in, that haze, and it doesn't have to get lighter. So this could be some cool things.